Hey my people, we are live on a new episode of Journey Back to Africa show. Today we are going to be discussing the history and the identity of the black race. We're going to start off actually from talking about the general origination of African history, where we get to know that every human being actually originated from Africa. Then we get to focus more on the evolution of black people in the United States, starting from the arrival of the first set of slavery in 1619. Now, let's get the show started. Hello everyone, hello Facebook, hello YouTube, hello black brothers and sisters around the world. Welcome to another episode of the Journey Back to Africa show. My name is Abreast, and I'm yours truly and daily the host of the show. Can you all hear me? Give me a big yes, a resounding and energy boosting yes if you can hear me. Where are you watching us from? Like I like to say on this show, we are creating a community of connected black brothers and sisters. Connected not just because of the color of our skin, but also in purpose, aspiration, dream, and in thought. So let's know how diverse our amazing community is. If you are on live, comment #live and let me know where you are watching us from. If you are going to be catching a replay, it's awesome. #replay and where in the world exactly you are watching us from. Let's know, like I said, how diverse our amazing community is. I'm so excited to be here again on the show. You know why? Because I know a lot of you are actually your break time or actually have a ton of other things to do, but you've taken time to be here for us to hang out and discuss about you as an African American or as a black person generally in the diaspora, and then of course our ancestor, that's Africa back home. So it's actually exciting. Peace and love to every one of you brothers and sisters watching around the globe. Thank you so much for joining. So last time on the show, we actually talked about why you as an African American or as a black man or woman living in a non-African soil take the initiative and the courage to create financial and future security back home in Africa. We talked about very, very beautiful and insightful, emotionally reading reasons, 4 of them why you should take that initiative. If you missed that or you'd love to learn more about that, go back in the channel and search why as black living abroad, why you should create financial and future security back home. And if you are watching from Facebook, simply go ahead in the group and search for that, and you'll be able to access that content and also own the reasons for yourself. It's actually amazing. It's beautiful for us to understand deeply why we should do what we should do as black. Like I mentioned briefly the other day, we talked about discrimination. Discrimination is not something I'm going to sit back here as an African living in Africa to tell you about. It's something you know better, you are aware of, you live by that all day. And then what is the implication of that in your everyday life? If you could be able to avoid discrimination, I mean, if you could live in an environment where you're not discriminated against, and you are still able to live successfully, build this kind of business that you could ever dream of in a short period of time, would it be worth it for you to drop the pain and everything you are putting up to sacrifice to live in the Western world back home? But like I said last week, it's not going to be smart. I mean, it's going to really be foolhardy for you to wake up one day and come to Africa. Instead, what you should do is to dig the well before you become unquenchably thirsty. In advance, before you decide to move to Africa, dig your well by making plans, creating plans for 5 years, 10 years, no matter, depending on what is comfortable for you. Create a plan that you can be able to safely create something that will serve as security back home for you in Africa. So that's about it. Go ahead and watch the last episode. You are going to actually love it and then own more of the reasons for yourself. Today, like I introduced, we're going to be talking about the history and the identity of black people. Before I go ahead, why is it necessary to talk about that? I mean, this is Journey Back to Africa show. We're supposed to be talking about the processes, the expectations, the experiences, and everything that it takes to actually be able to make the leap back home. But I figured it's important for us to understand deeply who we are, where did we come from, what's our history, what's our lineage, what are our ancestors, and all of that. That is going to give us a deeper inspiration and make us understand, have a clear perspective towards what we should do and why we should take the step we should take. So today is going to be the day for doing that. We're going to be starting off, and because I'm not an historian myself, so I have now taken the lead. I've taken the move to actually gather or take together some very vital video that are produced by other people that will take us through this journey. One of them is by JB2A. It's actually going to expose us to the fact that it's amazing, and in fact it's quite surprising too, that every human being actually emanated or originated from Africa. So our first video is going to take us through the journey and make us understand why every human being actually raised or actually emanated from Africa. It's actually going to be a short part. I just wanted to use that to create the introduction and set background. Like I said in the introduction, the main focus is going to be on the part of the evolution of black people in United States. So let's get started. Have a look at this.
This is the start of a journey, bringing you the history of the African people from the beginning of time to the modern era. A TV series based on a unique project put together by UNESCO known as the General History of Africa. Africa's history written and told by Africans. Africa has the longest history of anywhere on Earth because it is here that humankind originated. In the past, expert opinion was divided about this, but now the debate is closed. This is where it all began for us humans, and it was from Africa that we migrated to other parts of the world. In this program, I'll be following the trail of evidence on human evolution. East Africa's Rift Valley is where we begin. We evolved here over millions of years. Here in Tanzania, the landscape looks much like it would have done at the time of early humans, the contours of the land sculpted by volcanic eruptions. The Ngorongoro crater behind me is the world's largest and most complete volcanic crater. Early humans and their ancestors have lived in its ecosystem for more than 3 million years. It's believed that a hunter-gatherer culture existed with tribes migrating in and out of the area as they have done until recent history. Across this dry riverbed, little more than 100 kilometers away from the Ngorongoro crater, there exists a group of people who live by hunting and gathering their food from the wild, much as our ancestors did. They are the Hadzabe tribe, and they live on the edge of Lake Eyasi. I need a local guide, David Maragu, to take me, because this tribe lives in isolation from modern society. And David has spent many years getting to know them. He's taking me into the bush to meet them. The Hadzabe are unique in that they are the only big game hunters left in the world who live purely from what they kill or find growing wild. They don't keep animals or grow food, and they move around to new hunting grounds every few weeks, building temporary shelter as they go. There are only about 1,000 of them in all, and they live in small autonomous communities. This is one of the more accessible groups. I'm keen to meet the Hadzabe because they hold valuable insights and provide many examples of how we humans have lived for most of our history.
Mutana bawa.
Mutana bawa.
Mutana.
Oh.
Mutana bawa.
Mutana bawa.
Mutana bawa.
They welcome me warmly, and I'm immediately struck by the fact that the group meeting me are all male. The modern clothes, by the way, have been given by charities. They would normally be semi-naked, dressed in covers made from animal skins. And awesome just about sums up how I feel about meeting them. They hunt with bows and arrows, making their own weapons, and they start a fire in the traditional way. They don't have any matches to speed up the process. So, David, now I'm coming to say hello to the ladies.
Yes.
I'll let you go first. I forgot now you say hello already. Hello.
Mutana ayah.
Mutana Aya. Mutana Aya. Mutana Aya.
Mutana ayah.
Mutana Aya. Mutana Aya. So the men and women stay separately.
The woman and man sleep together, but the day is separate because everybody doing our own different activities.
This is nobako, which in the Hadzabe language means baobab, a fruit that's consumed widely across Africa. The women are so welcoming and don't seem to mind at all that I'm interrupting their craft making. I want to ask these ladies just how they spend their day. What is a typical day for them?
So welcome back. How was it for you? For me, it's actually very, very expository and revealing. I get to understand, like I said, it's brief, but I get to understand that Africa itself is so important, so much so that the entire human race actually emanated from this beautiful continent called Africa. So it's actually, if you love to see more about this video, go ahead and search African history on YouTube. It's actually, like I said, it's by Zainab Zibawe. Go ahead, she has a lot of history about Africa. You will be lost in learning and watching most of this content. So let's proceed to the next video, and this video is going to talk to us about the evolution, like I said, the evolution of black people in the United States. It's going to take it from the scratch, where from the point of arrival of slavery into the United States in 1619, and then walk us through the experiences, every landmark or milestone event that happened from that time till the present day. So have a good time watching.
History of African Americans. African Americans account for a large portion of the American population. At the turn of the 21st century, there were 36 million African Americans in the South, 2 million in New York City, 1 million in Chicago, and around 500,000 to 1 million African Americans living in Detroit, Philadelphia, and Houston. Early history of African Americans. History of African Americans began when 20 Africans were dropped in the English colony of Virginia in 1619. They worked as indentured servants who were bound to an employer for a limited number of years. Their population kept growing and reached 760,000 in 1790. Most of them were directly imported from Africa or were the children of slave mothers, accounting for 1/5 of the population of the United States. The blacks were documented into slavery in Virginia in 1661 and all the English colonies by 1750. During that time, they were considered an inferior race with heathen culture. They were forced to work in the farmlands of the New World. Africans were sold as merchandise by European traders on slave ships across the Atlantic Ocean to the West Indies, the region of the North Atlantic Ocean, and the Caribbean. At least 1/6 of them died during the journey due to shock, disease, and suicide. Slavery in America. During the period of the 17th and 18th centuries, Africans and African Americans, referring to those born in the New World, were forced to work as slaves on tobacco, rice, and indigo plantations of the southern coast, from the Chesapeake Bay colonies of Maryland and Virginia south to Georgia. Eventually, slavery became rooted in the South's huge cotton and sugar plantations. Legislation was passed by President Thomas Jefferson in 1807 to end the slave trade in America. However, it did nothing but boosted the domestic slave trade in the country. Black women were forced to conceive as early as age 13 and to give birth as often as possible. There were still free black people making up 1/10 of the entire African American population. They originated with former indentured servants and their descendants. Some of them migrated from the West Indies or were freed by their owners. But while in the South they were subject to restrictions imposed on slaves, in the North they were not allowed to vote, own any property, and travel freely. They even faced the risks of being kidnapped and enslaved. Movements to end slavery. Abolitionists in Britain and the United States in the 1840 to 1860 period developed large, complex propaganda campaigns against slavery. Among the free blacks in the North were emerging African American leaders in many states, such as Philadelphia, Boston, and New York City. They initially held national and state conventions in early 1830. However, these people shared different opinions on how to deal with slavery and discrimination. Several leaders encouraged slaves to revolt and overthrow their masters, while others thought they should enhance the economy and establish a modern black country in Africa. Thus, African Americans founded Liberia in West Africa, which foreshadowed the development of Pan-African nationalism. American Civil War. According to the Missouri Compromise of 1820, there must be an equal number of slave and free states, but this was abrogated, leading to slavery in all American territory. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of America on the anti-slavery platform of the new Republican Party. At the beginning of 1861, a movement was launched in an attempt to liberate all the country's slaves. It was the Civil War. However, the initial goal of Lincoln was not to abort slavery, but to emancipate gradually, with the federal government compensating the slaveholders for the loss of their property. But in September of 1862, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, stating that all slaves were to be free, making the Civil War a war to end slavery. African Americans after the Civil War. After the Civil War, nearly 4 million slaves were freed, gained their citizenship, and the right to vote by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, respectively. However, all of these new provisions were ignored, especially in the South. During Reconstruction, with leadership from educated African Americans from the North and abroad, they gradually wielded political power in the South. However, it didn't last long due to economic pressure and violent anti-black activities, such as ones from the Ku Klux Klan. The white supremacy once again dominated, leading to racial separation all over the southern states. In the post-Reconstruction years, both African Americans in the South and the North struggled to find a job. So many of them decided to migrate westward. Impacts of World War I. In 1900, nearly 8 million African Americans still lived in the South. However, due to economic depression, more African Americans moved northwards and were then embroiled in World War I. During the war, thousands of black officers were commissioned, and many served abroad in labor battalions and service regiments. In 1919, the Universal Negro Improvement Association was established in the Harlem district of New York City by Marcus Garvey, a black nationalist born in Jamaica. With several 100,000 members, it is considered to be the largest mass movement of African Americans in the country's history. Garvey's movement ceased after he was jailed and deported to his home country. The Great Depression. Due to the Great Depression of the 1930s, a large number of African Americans lost their jobs amidst inherent discrimination. Virtually ignored by the Republican administrations of the 1920s, black voters drifted to the Democratic Party, especially in the northern cities. They supported Democratic candidate Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1932 presidential race, with the establishment of the New Deal reforms. African Americans were aided with low-cost public housing, education, and more jobs. Impacts of World War II. The outbreak of World War II, along with the industrial boom, put an end to the Depression in 1939. With support from President Roosevelt, African Americans secured more jobs at better wages during the war. More and more blacks migrated from the rural South to the industrial cities of the North, which was known as the Great Migration. However, due to culminating job competition along with serious housing shortages, race riots broke out in many areas. The worst occurred in Detroit in June 1943. During the war, a large portion of African American soldiers overseas were in service units and combat troops remained segregated. But then integrated officer training was subject to ratification. In 1949, 4 years after the end of World War II, the armed services finally adopted a policy of full integration. The Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement was the persistent and deliberate step of African Americans in the 1940s and 1950s. Direct, nonviolent action by African Americans achieved several successes, such as the bus boycott of 1955 to 56, led by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in Alabama, student sit-ins movement in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960, and freedom rides in Alabama, Mississippi to defy segregation on interstate buses in 1961, Freedom Now Party in Michigan in 1964, and national attention in the spring of 1963 in Alabama. Within 15 years after the Supreme Court prescribed all-white primary elections in 1944, the number of the registered black electorate in the South increased more than five-fold, reaching 1.25 million in 1958. The culmination of the Civil Rights Movement was in 1963, when King addressed the crowd of about 250,000 demonstrators gathered on the Mall from Lincoln Memorial. The march aided in securing the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which banned discrimination in voting, public accommodations, and employment. Post-Civil Rights Era of African American History. In 1989, Douglas Wilder became the first African American elected governor in U.S. history. In 1992, Carol Moseley Braun of Illinois became the first black woman elected to the U.S. Senate. There were 8,936 black office holders in the United States in 2000, showing a net increase of 7,467 since 1970. In 2001, there were 484 black mayors. The 39 African American members of Congress form the Congressional Black Caucus, which serves as a political bloc for issues relating to African Americans. The appointment of blacks to high federal offices, including General Colin Powell, chairman of the U.S. Armed Forces Joint Chiefs of Staff 1989 to 93, United States Secretary of State 2001 to 05, Condoleezza Rice, Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs 2001 to 04, Secretary of State in 2005 to 09, Ron Brown, United States Secretary of Commerce 1993 to 96, and Supreme Court Justices Thurgood Marshall and Clarence Thomas, also demonstrates the increasing visibility of blacks in the political arena. The dramatic political breakthrough came in the 2008 election, with the election of Barack Obama, the son of a black Kenyan father and a white American mother. He won overwhelming support from African American voters in the Democratic primaries, even as his main opponent Hillary Clinton had the support of many black politicians. The post-civil rights era is also notable for the new Great Migration, in which...
Awesome, we're back. How amazing again, like I asked earlier, how amazing was that for you? For me, it's actually another very, very expository session, getting to understand deeper. As me back here in Africa, trying to connect and relate with black brothers and sisters around the world. It was a moment for me where I get to understand who these people are. How did they get separated from the rest of us back here in Africa, and what is the experience like, what's the evolution like from the point of slavery to the present day, So it was actually very amazing. The last part that we're going to be talking about is a very, very interesting one. It actually talks about, it's actually a TED talk. She talked about what it is to feel like, what is the identity of an African American in Africa. I'm sure this perhaps might be one of the most interesting parts, or this perhaps might be one of the most interesting parts or most interesting moments in this show today. So let's go ahead and have a listening to her.
The rhythmic sound of chanting, beating drums, the smell of incense and delicious foods. Now close your eyes and imagine a picturesque lakeside community in the middle of the forest. It was my first time at Lake Mai-Ndombe in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I had found my Wakanda way before Black Panther was a thing. Over the years, I've touched down in countries all across the continent, from Senegal to Gambia, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Kenya, to name a few. And despite the long transatlantic treks from the US, the journey to Africa never felt long. I remember before I was Dr. Ashley Milton, environmental scientist and founder of She Grows It, I thought I knew all about long journeys. The walks down Crenshaw Drive in my hometown of Los Angeles always seemed endless. The tedious days of a grueling master's and PhD program in Washington, D.C. surely would never end. To the time it took my Black girl magic to grow my locks, and certainly the path to creating my own DC-based firm that centers evolutionary economics and environmental diplomacy to enhance the human experience and build communities of the future. I've always understood, though, that the destination matters far less than the path there. And now the journey I'm on is navigating down a path that enables others to take their own. As humans, I know that sometimes we have a tendency to take our own paths, but not all paths or all journeys are made by choice. I derive from a history that forced a path predicated on the belief that African Americans were inherently and genetically inferior to whites, followed by institutional racism, which continues to perpetuate injury in today's society, is only a glimpse of what really goes down in my world. Slavery cannot be removed from my self-identity. It's my virtue of being African American. I must always and forever acknowledge that I am first an African. And multi-generational trauma paired together with continued oppression, absence of opportunity to heal or access the benefits available in society leads to post-traumatic slave syndrome. I remember before I left Los Angeles, California for college, I didn't know how much I was a product of my environment. I left Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, understanding that environmental injustices exist and that they disproportionately affect poor Black people in disenfranchised communities around the United States. I left the American University in Washington, D.C., understanding the laws and policies that govern environmental issues are being made by decision makers unaware of the science of the environment or unwilling to act on behalf of people who look like me. And that these disproportionate environmental conditions were persistent throughout the world and not just in the United States. I left my doctoral program understanding the science of the environment and how it has been used to disconnect, disrupt, and devalue Black lives and experiences globally. And I stand before you today, empowered, educated, and employed to share my message as a transdisciplinary methodologist looking to solve the world's problems of today by inviting everyone to have a seat at the table. I've also learned that you can't tell the story or solve the problem if 2/3 of the people aren't in the room actively contributing to the conversation. And from my experience in the classroom as a student and as a faculty, in courtrooms and in meeting rooms, I oftentimes find my lens, my voice as an African-American ecologist is a solitary one. I want to make sure that we all have a voice to sit at the table, and this Black girl was focused on telling that entire story, to make things that seem desperate and unrelated clear and connected, to give power back to the people by uncovering the muddle of who gets what and why. You see, I've set out on a journey, possibly the most significant journey I'll ever take, to create a global vehicle for strategy, development, and lifestyle solutions that create communities of the future, to build resilient communities with smart environmental solutions for economic growth that afford individuals to live free. Freedom can mean many different things to many people, but for the purpose of this talk, I define freedom as the ability of choice, the ability to live, to eat, and to be without exchanging all of your hours for dollars and all of your dollars for clothes, food, gas, data, all of which keep you in a cyclical cycle of, let's just call it the opposite of freedom. And I know that slavery is polarizing, even the use of the word. I debated using it in this talk in order to not trigger people, but in this diaspora story, it was important to mention because it's very much connected to my story and my journey to finding freedom. A magical space where I could live and thrive in place, safely, judged by humanity and not by my color. And as an African American on a quest for freedom across this continent, I must embrace this idea of super Blackness. I realize that my trauma from post-traumatic slave syndrome sometimes inhibits my ability to truly be free. And in those moments, I'm faced with the reality of my disconnection from my homeland. I'm reminded of slavery and its roles, but I'm also empowered by the connections I've made in communities of people who look like me, who speak like me, who dance like me, and who act like me, and for who all intensive purposes are me. The evolution of the diaspora and its ambassadors are 2/3 the size of the United States, and with organized, revolutionary thought can make sweeping changes for all safe spaces in the societies that we create with #us in mind. It starts by rejecting nationalism and the rise of the nation state as our identifiers, because the setbacks we are experiencing across political and economic turfs are startling, but they're not unexpected. The statistics always seem to speak to our demise. Black women graduate college with the most student loan debt, yet 12 years after starting, white men have paid off 44%, while Black women owe 13% more. Black women are paid 61 cents to every dollar paid to men, amounting to ridiculously large wage gaps. And Black women, because of our dual victimization by race and sex-based discrimination, coupled with the disproportionate responsibilities we carry for the economic and social welfare of our families, they echo Malcolm's sentiments that the Black woman is the most disrespected person in society. And because we are not free until we all are free, we have to be conscious to what's happening and not constrict ourselves to making other people feel comfortable. We who wear the mask must emerge, because all of our phrasings, race relations, racial chasms, racial justice, white privilege, even white supremacy, it serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience. It dislodges brains, it blocks airways, it rips muscles, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth. You must never look away from this. You must always remember that the sociology, the history, the economics, the graphs, the charts, the regressions all land with great violence upon the body. And we can no longer ignore this. Therefore, I embody Africa. I am an African goddess, a queen of kings, a warrior. And my return has greatly increased my quality of life, my outlook, and my perception of my true beauty. I have learned to redefine the perception of Africa through art, through culture, through customs, through food, through business, and most importantly, through my own lens, unabridged by false stories moonlighting as history to keep me from my glory and my destiny. A continent with 54 countries, 1.2 billion people speaking over 2,000 languages is the richest continent, representing 20% of the Earth's landmass. With all the climates you could wish for, mountains, volcanoes, beaches, scuba diving, motocross, you name it, Africa's got it. And every African throughout the diaspora should have a birthright experience. This means we should all have a connection to home. That could be a visit, a vacation, living, working, or investing at home. Growing up, I would look forward to getting the 64 Crayola box with the sharpener on the back to start my school year. The assortment of colors I thought only existing in this man-made box of crayons I would use to create the spaces I want to live and thrive in. I never imagined that that picture would come to life on the continent of Africa. This landmass is a magical space for new beginnings and lifelong journeys that are self-empowering. The results of that visit, that vacation, that jump to live, work, and invest in Black is a true embodiment of Black Lives Mattering, because it feeds your soul in a way like no other. The warmth of the sun, the love of the people, the vibrations of that beating drum talking to and feeding your inner spirit, letting you know that you have finally made it home. So my charge to the diaspora is, will you come? Thank you.
So welcome back. I hope you have had an amazing moment listening to her. For me, it's really been amazing, like I said, and like the previous ones, it's really been amazing and really expository. It has given us the opportunity, and I hope that it has given me personally the opportunity, and I hope that is same for you, the opportunity to retrace and relearn our identity so that we can clearly understand the right source of our energy and inspiration and know ourselves even better than the physical. You understand? So we can get to know ourselves even better than the physical. Let me know in the comment bar, what is that thing that struck you the most? What is your most favorite among the history, trying to retrace and relearn our identity as Black people? What is that thing that struck the most with you? Let me know in the comment bar, and let's continue the conversation in the group. If you are not already part of the group, joining Back to Africa Show on Facebook, just go ahead, search on Facebook, and you'll be more than welcome to the group. It's actually a community for Black people around the world. It's our safe home where we can interact freely without fear of discrimination and everything that is present in the reality of living abroad. And that will be all for this episode. If you love this episode, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel so that you can have direct access and prompt access again to the subsequent episode that will come in the future. Lastly, depending on where you are in your journey of learning about Africa and returning to the motherland, you will agree with me that whether you need a place called home to live in when you come on holiday, or return to Africa, or a safe fortress for your future financial security, is not a question for debate. The real question, however, is what would the home be? Is it going to be a personal home? Is it going to be a high-price lodging or a family house? and what level of comfort and control would that kind of home allows you, and what would the impact be on your finances immediately and into the future. But what if I tell you that there is an opportunity that allows you to own exotic dream home back home in Africa while you work and live abroad? I'm talking about 4-bedroom terrace duplex apartment, a Google smart home, central power grid, and also have a BQ and suite, and a host of other amazing features that it is typical of the kind of home that you see in the Western world. You can access or you can own this home starting with 10,000 USD. I mean, just $10,000, and the total payment spread over a couple of years. And guess what? The most interesting part is it is actually a risk-free. What do I mean? I mean you are protected by a 120% performance guarantee, which simply covers you. Upon the delivery of the house to you, you have 7 days to do quality assessment. If for any reason you are not pleased with what's being delivered to you, you can get back 100% of your capital invested and 20% whooping return of investment. That is to cover the time taking and interest of money. This is so that you feel zero pain of trying at all. So if you love that, if that sounds so interesting to you, go ahead to luxuryhomeBackHome.com, as you are seeing on your screen. Go ahead and book the call, and one of my representatives or myself perhaps to explain and lay the cards before you towards achieving this dream for yourself. So that will be it today. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel so that you can always have access to the future episode. So that will be it. See you again same time next week on another exciting episode of the show, Journey Back to Africa Show. Remember to like, share, comment, join the group, and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye bye.